Hello and welcome. I'm Bronwyn Kenku, and my backyard isn't exactly like most people's backyards. Uh, I have, I believe, 40 acres that I'm on, maybe more, and I've inherited Stardew Valley lifestyle. I, except there's no community and no community center. So I'm getting further and further in Stardew in my Let's Play slash live play on uh, Sundays. It's been really good. I am learning more and more about what that game is trying to be and what it's doing. But it's it's so funny how much harder it is to do farming in real life. It's a lot of science. You have to know the pH of your soil. You need to understand shade versus not shade, partial sunlight, and it's so much work. It's a lot out there. Uh, so over the past week, I put in a flower box behind my house, and we put in some garlic because that's the kind of person I am. And I'm not sure it's gonna get enough sun, which is wild. Like, it's outside, it's out in the elements, but because it's only gonna get morning sun, I'm not sure how well it's gonna do. So we'll see about that. We'll see how that progresses. I will keep everyone informed. But and then it's about keeping it nitrogen rich without burning it. Because, like, when I think of nitrogen, I'm not most people. I think about, wait, that's, you can get a good source of that from blood. You can get a good source of that from urine. And it's just about, like, how to process that and how to dilute it. So, I did a lot of Googling this week. So I have to be sure next time my family hunts to gather the blood and make blood meal. I'm pretty sure most people have heard of bone meal, but they may not have heard of blood meal. So blood meal is what happens when you boil out the excess water in blood, lay it out, and let it dry. You crumble that, and then you have blood meal. Bone meal involves grinding up bones into small bits, and the issue with urine is that it's too concentrated for plants. So it wouldn't be something you'd want to put directly on plants. For a long period, you wouldn't want to. That's why if you're familiar with a dog or some animal peeing in the same spot, and it killing the plants around it, that's because it's gotten too much exposure, too much of the uh, minerals and nutrients in that substance. So it's wild. Planting is a lot of science. It's impressive that people figured this stuff out when they were hunter-gatherers and, like, any kind of farming. Like, it just blows my mind. And then beyond that, you have to figure out rotation. Like, if you plant the same thing in the same spot year after year, you're gonna not have a good yield. You're gonna deplete the soil. It's gonna be over-rich in other things. Like, you've gotta really balance it. And oh man, it's wild. I'm not going to talk about this. I attempted to make some iron rich concrete or substance. That's just, it fell over. It didn't drain the way I wanted it to, it's not gonna be a thing. I'll maybe try again another time, but not this week. Maybe in this to current week. Man. It's so funny that, like, nature is so mystical and so magical, and that there's so much you can do in this sandbox of a life. But it's a lot of knowledge, it's a lot of know-how. Uh, yep. Andy in chat brings up a good point of four-field rotation works out really well. Because I believe the four major soil component nutrients that matter are nitrogen, phosphorus, and then there's one or two more that are like super important. Calcium, maybe? Maybe, unsure. But you want the crops to be refilling what they do. So any annual or perennials, yeah, the ones that come back every year, are going to have other stuff around them to help with that scenario. I imagine they have a very low impact on the soil, so they kind of try to keep everything in the same balance, and a lot of natural stuff will do that too. It's just that as we modified our plants and selectively bred them to do different things and yield more, we turned them into their own little experiments and time bombs. So it's one of those things where if we had a better knowledge of what we were doing and how it would affect everything, things would probably turn out better. But I imagine people really enjoy their fruits and vegetables as they are currently. Corn really took off, but beans and squash never quite caught up. Which, living near a Native American reservation, I learned a lot about the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, and how they actively work together to create a good ecosystem for the plants. So, corn creates the stalk for the beans. The beans they absorb nitrogen, and I believe the squash puts it back. So and also the squash covers the ground, the beans cover the center, and the corn is the stalk. So you get beans and corn from the same plant, basically. Same plot, I should say, not plant. But it's one of those things people don't think to do, and it's probably pretty tricky to set up, but very cool if you can get it going. I'm a big fan of doing less work. Because if you don't, because we do plant beans, but we don't plant corn, you have to have these giant stakes for them to climb. And it can be a huge pain to put them in and take them out every year. Also, squash isn't... I don't know. Squash is weird. A lot of people, especially in this area, grow zucchini. And zucchini is apparently very easy to grow for a lot of people because they'll end up with zucchinis the size of my arm, and they'll be like, please take them, we're being overrun. And a lot of people don't know what to do with zucchini. And zucchini noodles are a great option for people like me who can't have a lot of carbs. And I think it's wonderful, but not everyone has that option or don't think of zucchini that way. They try to think of like casseroles and maybe something like a ratatouille, but probably not. Anyway, it's it's all food. It's all engaging with the planet, engaging with your little space. And the interesting part about this in this time in our life is that it's not really worth it. Like, most of the time, if you make a field of vegetables and you were to buy them, your labor versus the timing would not pay out. You would not have this. Uh, it wouldn't be even, but if you're unemployed or whatever, it kind of works out to be a little bit better if you get a yield. Because there's always that chance that it doesn't play out. So, there's always that. Uh, um, it's it's a lot. It's a lot to think about. There's always math. uh, Math and science are the world we live in. I forget. Oh yeah, it was. It's currently the Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel national tryouts or whatever, and too often in games we're doing a lot of math even if we don't know we are. We're crunching points, we're trying to find the most efficient and effective method for what we want to do. And sometimes you get so locked into the combos and lines that you're used to that you can't see with a little math that you can do things a little different and get a whole lot more for the same buck. Like, it's truly wild. Um, I and in gaming in general, like sometimes you might in like a board game figure out something that you want to do, but it takes like 5 or 6 moves. But then if you make that play enough, you eventually might see that you can do that in 4 moves very effectively. And then like risk reward ratios and whatnot. But it's all math. It's all figuring out how to get there. And if math were taught that way, if math were presented in a means that we could understand and have fun, then not everyone would have this like negative association. Because we don't. We don't have a good association with math. Math is concerned at or like regarded as something that's awful that we just had to do in school but never use again. And it's wrong. It's just hidden throughout the world. And kids should never have had to ask, well, when are we going to use this in real life? Because there are great examples in games and in different things, but teachers aren't really set up or built to understand either. So it just propagates the infinite We don't know why this exists, but you gotta learn it. Alright, and that is last week's video. Let's hop over to this week's video. I'm gonna grab my water because I seem to have forgotten it. So, we will be right back. Okay, well, whatever. Scratch that, I forgot it in a bigger way. Never mind. So, we're going on. This week it is very green. There's a lot going on. Content warning, at one point in this video, I may get a bunch of ants on my arm and have to shake them off. If that bothers you, please, you don't have to watch the rest of this video, I understand. But that is towards the later half, so I would not want anyone to have that fear of bugs crawling on them, to have to worry about that. It's a lot to ask, and there are so many fears out there. It's unreasonable. We have not gotten much water, which is unfortunate, but we keep going. I mean, the creek is doing the best it can. Everything is using a bunch of water, creating all this green, all these plants. There's so much. I try harder in this to have that upward angle, to be better about not looking at the ground, but you know, sometimes there's just cool tracks and stuff, and I'm interested in what's going on in the ground. But, you know, it's hard when you wake up late and you have to just get up and do a walk and get out there. And it doesn't always line up. Feels a lot like scenarios I talk about this week, where even if things are going poorly and you're depressed and things aren't feeling all that great, sometimes you just kind of gotta persevere and keep going. You might not feel the best, you might have a misstep, and that could ruin your day, or you could keep going. You can keep moving forward and seeing what else life has for you. Let's see where we can get to, you know, like, sometimes it's the opposite of what people expect. I know a lot of people think bad things happen in threes, or good things can forebode joy because what's going to happen to ruin this. But the opposite can be true. Like, sometimes a bad thing happens and it can be like, well, what if this is just impending something really good? I don't think a lot of people get that thought process. But if one can be true, so could the other. It's impressive just how much there is out there, and how we don't really understand the big picture, and if there is any reason to believe that there's a big picture. But life sure is happening, and we just kind of have to muddle through it and imagine that there's some sort of reasoning. So, with that, I try not to, like, dwell. Because therapy, and I've learned not to ruminate on things. Try to be very aggressive in my radical acceptance. That was a sad moment, but we're moving past it. I had talked about it already, and that's enough. Um, because radical acceptance isn't just like the same as bottling. Because if you're bottling, you're like holding on to the moment that made you upset or mad, and it's just getting pushed into this imaginary little bottle, and you're filling it up, and eventually it's going to overflow. Radical acceptance is understanding that stuff happens. It may have sucked a lot. It may have been completely in or out of your control. Either is okay. It's important to accept that and move on. It's so big and so important to be in the moment. And it's that point of optimism and not optimism, but anyway, it's being at this crux of anything could happen in the future. Let's be positive about it. And nothing I do in life matters. So let's keep going. And being in that crux of life happens, and I'm here to experience it, good and bad. Because the good does not feel as good without the high. The highs don't feel as good without the lows, and the lows really reinforce how much we care about the highs. Like, it's wild how experiences can do that. Like, the best example in a game is like when a bunch of NPCs are talking and someone you have no connection with dies. Just like, oh, well, that guy died. Who cares? That's, that there was no highs, there were no lows. That person just is out of there. But if you establish a connection with this character, if they make their life really full and that they've got a lot going on, when they die, you suddenly care about why they died and who killed them and how you can get revenge if need be, if that's an option. Like, things you can do for the family. Like, how would you manage these little things? And, the ripple effect of the absence of that person having gravity. Like, if these characters matter, they should have gravity. It's something that doesn't get explored enough. Like, I was playing Suikoden 2 yesterday, and I forgot to unmute. But regardless of that, in the current campaign, there's a point in which, spoilers for Suikoden 2 if you haven't played it, one of the main characters opts to give up everything and run away. Very deep in the game. And I was so perplexed at like, wait, why? What 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 prompted this? Like, why are we doing this? It's like it felt so bizarre. It felt like it should have been a bad end, but it was the first option in the dialogue box, so unfortunately I hit it. So it was a lot of like seeing where this goes and figuring out like I suppose they want you to care for this character and everything, But also, I have no idea what I'm carrying. Don't worry about that. uh, but when like that moment was so surreal because the gravity of leaving the army that you created uh, would mean that it would fall apart. Like there would be no game. It would just end, right? And I I appreciated what they were trying to do, but it didn't fit. It didn't feel right. I love all the crows on my property. They're so good. They squawk at me all the time. I send them little kisses back, so they do try their best to communicate, I guess. It's hard because I don't know how best to counter all of the years of scarecrows and my grandfather scaring away the crows from the crops and seeing what I can do for them. Because it would be nice to have more, but we have at least 2 sets of 4 or 3 that hang out. The other day I had a turkey vulture hanging out outside my house, picking at some bones. That was really cool. But there's so many cool animals that people don't even engage with. Like, I've taken to whistling at birds and different chipmunks and things, trying to mimic their little uh, sounds and whatnot. It's There's so much cool nature. It's really upsetting when uh, there's only one bird in a nature sound thing that I try to listen to, and it's just like, that's not what outside sounds like. Or when I try to find a babbling brook or something, like I know my brook. I know how it babbles. Like this is someone pouring water out of a can or something. Like this is not this is not what that sounds like. And there's just so much nuance to nature. There's so many birds, so many little sounds, so many insects. Everything around you. It's all an ecosystem and it creates a symphony. The the wind in the trees. There are certain loud trees, which sounds weird to say, but we have this one kind of tree that has these weird little leaves that catch the wind and shake against each other and bang, and it's so loud. It's unreasonable. Oh, it's a lot, but like you wouldn't think of that when you're trying to create a soundscape. You wouldn't think of like what kind of insects are around, what birds, what sets of birds. What sets of birds are fighting? uh are there woodpeckers? Are they eating well? So I hope everyone can enjoy their soundscape, enjoy their surroundings, and think about them a little more. And accept a little bit more math in your life and try to understand that it's just how things work. So, thank y'all for watching. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe if you're on YouTube. And I will be back next week with another video. Thank y'all for watching. And those on Twitch, I'm going to try to play something, but I really need to get water. So we will be right back. Thank y'all. Have a great one.